Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Vampire Coast in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now I put them at the top of the list of races that do need a rework in Warhammer 3. Vampire Coast was a pre-Potion of Speed race. And Potion of Speed significantly changed the game, like in a fairly major way. For all the people criticizing Warhammer 3 for good reasons, it's worth remembering that Warhammer 2 had tons and tons of issues, especially with Immortal Empires. Vortex map was certainly a lot better than Realms of Chaos, however. Still, Vampire Coast has not received an update since then, and that's one of the problems. They worked well within the meta of Warhammer 2, because the meta of Warhammer 2 did work quite well with limited armies, at least for many races. But in Warhammer 3, it's about getting as many armies as possible, dealing with as many enemies as possible, because you're going to end up in situations like this, where after a certain point, various AI factions are going to throw multiple armies at you. So having one good, powerful army can still carry you, but the problem is, what do you do when you're dealing with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 good armies? Because over here, we've got 6 at the very least. It's a mess of a situation. I beat Marcus Wolfhard, got the peace, and then Rakarth declared war on him. Thanks, Rakarth. Very much appreciated. So one of the problems with the Vampire Coast is their battle situation. A lot of their units have low armor, low leadership, and you have a range-focused faction. The problem with this is it's one thing to have low armor, low leadership units with a melee faction, like the Vampire Counts, but when you've got ranged duels with lower armor and leadership, you end up losing a lot of ranged fights. And you're supposed to be a range-dominated faction focused on gunpowder units. Now, gunpowder units do work better in 5.0 and Thrones of Decay, but there's still issues. Like, take a look at these armies. We've got Alistair and another character with a bunch of units. Melee units, cavalry units, artillery, magic, very limited magic, but still, a bunch of units over here. And I'm going to fight this battle outnumbered 2v1. I'm going to be able to win it. This is a pretty decent army. Maybe not the best, but it's certainly a decent army. It's got tons of artillery. It's got some ranged units. It's got Death Guard for flank protection. It's got a Necrophex Colossi as regiment renown. The only regiment renown that you can actually recruit without going for the pieces of 8, which, yeah, it can be annoying. And it obviously has heroes. So we got Magic, we got Gunnery White, we got Morgul Hunter. On the battlefield, we encounter our first issue over here. I do have a good amount of high ground in a certain position, but the problem is with those reinforcements coming so soon, if I deploy my army over there, I will be outflanked and I will be eliminated. So instead, I do need to deploy all of my units over here in order to keep them alive and not lose the battle. I'm going to take Luthor Harkon, as well as certain other things. I'm going to keep the Necrophex Colossi over there. But I'm going to take Luthor Harkon, deck droppers, as well as 2 of my heroes to just launch an attack on the enemy while positioning my cannons over here. And also Queen Bess in the back. Depth Guard in the back as well. And we are just going to position Gunnery White. The reason I'm keeping the Gunnery White back is because if I do start taking it for a ride, it's not going to necessarily go so well. So just start attacking over here. Now I don't necessarily have the entire magic skill unlocked over there with a Vampire Fleet Captain, so that's certainly going to be a bit of an issue. Okay, Deck droppers doing some damage, but also taking a decent amount of damage as well. Let's do one of his spells right here. And we're gonna want to pull back over here. Just wait for these guys to be deployed. Let the entire enemy army surround him, because we got some nasty stuff that's available. And that's the key to winning this particular battle. Oh damn, they've taken a lot more damage than I expected. Well, that's what happens when you send something like that. When you send something like that in the middle of an enemy army, a ranged army. it does tend to happen. And now you can see that, okay, we're gonna have to withdraw these guys. They've taken a lot of damage. Maybe I should have been a bit less aggressive over here, who knows. Okay, let's get Luther Harkon to attack Alistair. We need to really keep him out of the fray. Okay, we got, we're gonna pull those guys out. And we're gonna buff that. We're gonna have some problems though using the artillery here because, yeah, the angle here is not gonna be particularly great, I gotta say. So just keep doing that. So the carronades are actually not gonna be quite as useful as I would like them to be. And that is going to certainly be a problem. Now obviously I can win this battle with using my army abilities that I do have and are pretty solid, pretty powerful. Tide calls, all that. So it is doable. Mind you, the AI is certainly not doing itself any favors in this particular situation. Okay. And just getting a bunch of them to attack one at a time. Gonna do another ship. Yes. Let's summon the Revenge. Okay. Eagle dead. So yeah, the angle of attack over here is certainly not ideal for me in this situation. Okay, they're trying to flank me. Silver Helms over there. That's the thing, against a proper army. And mind you, he's getting smacked to hell and back right here by my guys. And I'm certainly using a lot of the hero abilities to survive it, as well as a lot of the hero damage. Because yeah, that's the one thing you do have going for you as the Vampire Coast. You do have good heroes. The problem is you have limited hero capacity, so that is something that does end up screwing you over. And for whatever reason, some of these guys aren't even firing. Can you obliterate the enemy as I'd like you to? Okay, so get another tie call ability. Actually get two of them. Let's just get two, some cannons going over there. We got more spells soon enough. Alright, decent enough. Going decent enough. Silver Helms are going down. On the flank. Gotta pay attention to what's going on. By the way, Vampire Coast... didn't use that as I should have. That's on me. Okay. More artillery. And really, I'm just abusing the AI marching in like kind of like this kind of formation, which is gonna screw them over. They will charge. They're gonna charge in my cannons. That's the problem. You need to give your guns a line of sight, but if you do give them your guns a line of sight, that can happen, and it's gonna screw you over. So yeah, Alistair is gone. We do obviously have a good amount of magical capabilities. Okay, most of these guys are gone. But my cannons, lots of micro involved in an army like this, far more so than you might think. Okay. So just sort that out. So most of the initial army is gone, no problem. Disable guard mode, I don't realize why I had it on. Yeah, he doesn't have it on, thankfully. But I mean, we're surrounded. Oh. Eagle Club, bolt throwers, what can I say? Replenish more ammunition there. Might want to replenish some ammunition on Luther Harkon. Still use that lovely augment. Oh damn. They got wrecked. Where's my... What are you guys doing there? Shit. That was a mistake. Oh, these guys, yeah. They chased them down. We're gonna need to get them in melee. Before things really go to hell. Like if those ranged units get into... Ooh, he's dead. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, Silver and Guard, all that good stuff. So yeah, just pull them back. Lots of them incoming. Alright, they're breaking there, at the very least. Okay. Yeah, Silver Guards are dealt with. No, not Silver Guards. Silver Helms are dealt with. Might lose a hero. For all their power, they're still vulnerable. I mean, granted, I did leave that one in prolonged melee with Silver and Guard, so yeah, that didn't go so well. My Lines of Crix coming in. Lyrian Reavers coming in. We really need to hit the archers there. Okay, get a Lufer. Alright, he's done a good job. I mean, yeah, it's slow. Tide Call coming in. Oof. Well, cannon is gone. Alright, we won. Quote-unquote victory. Ended up losing half my army anyway, so GG. And that is actually a bigger problem than one might realize, because with so many casualties and not actually a lot of movement range in this situation, it's going to create a lot of issues. So I did win that battle, but as you can see, Alistair actually did survive, as did a bunch of the units here, so it's like next turn they won't have a problem, you know, just being able to attack me again. I mean, granted, in this case, like, it's not a favorable situation. Didn't quite expect Tyrion to show up with 2 stacks at this particular point. So I'm gonna have to basically retreat in this affair. But army issues, army roster issues, are just part of the problem. Now you might say, oh, you can replenish some of the losses after a battle with the Dead Rise Again. Yeah, you have a chance in Vampire Corruption to do so, but that's just the thing. It's only in Vampire Corruption and you're playing a faction that's focused on sea battles, right? Which in itself is going to be a problem. But yeah, the unit roster, like, it's just too weak, and crucially, it's too expensive. You can get a bunch of these zombies, obviously, very cheaply, but even then, like, they're so garbage tier. Because it's one thing to have, like, zombies in melee, or to have an entire melee zombie army, like the Vampire Counts, and you engage in melee, and that way the enemy range units are less important, obviously. But when you have a range-centric faction, like, yeah, you can corner camp, but it's like if the enemy marches against you, it's like gonna obliterate you. It's like very, very easy. It's like a glass cannon army, and doesn't, like, the army roster itself doesn't necessarily have that much of a cannon. I mean, it's kind of hilarious. Like, you only have 2 artillery units. Yeah, you can argue deck gunners, but limited range, lots of issues firing, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like you're down to carronades and mortars, and you only have 1 Queen Bess faction-wide. It's a powerful unit, really powerful unit, but it's just 1 unit, and even Queen Bess has very limited resistance. Like, you know, Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower has 40 armor, for instance. So that lack of survivability is absolutely a problem that you're going to encounter in a Vampire Coast campaign. And this isn't a good situation where I have a bunch of army benefits, because Lufer is still a legendary lord. You know, I get campaign movement range, I get army abilities, unit experience per battle, reduced upkeep. Need to upgrade that a bit more. But the problem with the Horde armies, it's costly and it takes time. I'm not fond of any of these Horde armies. Like, the growth of these settlements just takes too long in quite a few ways. And the fact that, oh, I have to choose, like, which structures do I want, or do I want to upgrade the main building, it's not a fun situation, I'm going to say that much. But okay, beyond the roster issues, which do exist, it's like, oh, you just need to play properly. It's like, again, it's got weaknesses. Having good heroes and lords does not make up for that. And there's many factions of the fucking game that have really good lords, really good heroes, and have good armies. Vampire Counts. Complete night and day difference. Lots of units, cheap units, zombies and skeletal warriors that are actually more useful than the vast majority, than a lot of the roster of the Vampire Coast. Really good heroes, really good lords, and quantity, because that's one of the problems. You can't increase your hero capacity. Like, if you look at settlements, you don't have a way of increasing hero capacity for either Morgul hunters or gunnery rights for regular settlements. The only thing you can do in settlements, and that's only if you have a port. By the way, the fact that you're playing Luthor Harkon and you don't start with a port is absurd, I should add. But with ports, only at tier 5 can you increase Vampire Fleet Captain capacity. Now, you have other ways. There is an office that you can assign that gives you 2 Vampire Fleet Captains. And the Horde armies themselves do give you some hero capacity. Like the main building will give you 1 hero capacity for Vampire Fleet Captains. But only when you get to tier 4. Right? So having to get that to tier 4 to increase hero capacity is not fun. Morgul hunters at tier 5. And then if we look at gunnery whites, it takes until tier 4 as well to increase their capacity. And there's only so many Horde armies you actually have. Because you only have your Legendary Lord and 4 others. You cannot confederate other factions of the Vampire Coast when you're playing them. I mean, I get it, they all hate each other, all that stuff, but it does severely limit your campaign potential. Like, a Vampire Coast campaign would be a very different beast if you had the ability of confederating the other pirates, right? Rule the seas, prove your worth, confederate the other factions because you are the superior pirate. Also, as you play a campaign, you gain infamy, and then you get, like, these end-game rogue armies. Well, this is not really an end-game. This is the first one, though. But you get these, like, pirates who are going to start attacking you, and you end up with a nightmare of a battle. And by the way, your overall armies, like, if you want a good army, like, you have some units that are good, like Death Guard, really good solid units, for instance, right? But they're expensive, and you have a poor economy. At the very least, you don't have that many climate issues except Wasteland and Mountain. It's like, okay, fair enough. We get virtually everything else except 4 of them, and they're not really too important because there's only so many magical forests, and Chaotic Wasteland is not the problem. Wasteland hurts a bit more, but yeah, doesn't really matter in a campaign like this. What does hurt in the most genuine way is the economy. So in Warhammer 2, this wasn't as much of an issue. But in Warhammer 3 it is. First off, you could say, oh, your economy doesn't matter because you can live off sacking and looting settlements. Let me clear this up. Greenskins earn a lot more income from sacking settlements, whereas Greenskins earn more money than the Vampire Coast, but can make their entire economy work purely on the idea of sacking settlements. You have nowhere near the same level of income as sacking settlements. I mean, hell, I could dare argue even Kislev gets more money from sacking settlements, and your economy is actually worse than Kislev. That's not a good situation when you're comparing anyone's economy to Kislev, who has a really terrible economy. You have a bit of a benefit over here with the Curse of the Bountiful Treasure to gain some money every 15 turns for every provincial capital that has, one of these plunder piles. Okay, all well and good. But the problem is, one, your cost for building these, like, it will take 10 turns to get the money back. And then on top of that, like, you're only going to be able to go up to 300 income at tier 5 from a provincial capital. This is actually worse than Kislev, because at least Kislev, with their main economic building, generates trade resource in the provinces. You can trade, but you're earning pitiful amounts of money. Like, again, this is a worse economy in Kislev. And for minor settlements, you're only going up to 200 income. You could argue, well, you get port income, right, like Norska, except Norska gets significant faction-wide effects through the ability of going for the various gods that vastly increase their port income. So you actually, as a Vampire Coast faction, end up winning less money from ports than Norska. Chew on that for a moment, if you want to. Like, you can argue, oh, the more ports you have, the more income you're gaining. It's like, okay, Norska can get double the income from ports or triple the income from ports faction-wide. And they actually have a better research tree than you as well. And their heroes are not limited in the way yours are. Yes, Norska is the superior naval faction compared to Vampire Coast. I mean, they don't have the Horde armies. They don't have the artillery, but in terms of making economy based on ports and sacking and looting settlements, even Norska, who have a ton of issues, undeniably so, they do make it work better. And The problem with ports inherently, they're vulnerable because the AI may not cross vast land distances to just attack a settlement, but they will do so via sea settlements. So you're creating a lot of vulnerabilities. You're not earning a lot of income from them. And you then have a conflict between taking those ports for yourself or getting pirate coves. So you can only put pirate coves in port settlements. Now, Creative Assembly in a recent QA stated outright that the pirate coves were the precursor for things like Skaven Undercities, Oxyotl Sanctums, Changeling cults, and Elspeth's gardens. But really, pirate coves are the worst in the game. Like, you could argue cults for chaos factions, but cults for chaos factions are not relevant. They're not important at all. And you're not losing it anywhere near as much to set up a chaos cult as you are in a vampire faction. Like, first off, they're mandatory. The only way to increase your capacity of Mongol hunters and gunnery rights, which do add a lot of power, and gaining a low recruit rank, is to get the pirate cove. All the other structures are meaningless, because even a tier 1 port will do better, will generate you more income, because, yeah, the port itself may be the same income, but you gotta consider the main settlement building as well. So, yeah, pirate coves for income, worthless. You could argue the research rate and income from trade tariffs, fair enough, but what about, income gained from local settlement income? Not really great. Vampire corruption, yeah, worthless. I mean, it could be useful if, you're setting them up, but the problem with setting pirate coves is you can't take the settlement. If it gets raised, you lose it. And then on top of that, you're leaving factions alive that you're at war with, because you can set these up with heroes, but limited hero capacity, and it's better to have them in armies, and cooldown cost, all that. The problem is, when you're setting these up, you actually have to do two things. You first want to sack the settlement, because while you can gain some money when you establish a pirate cove, it's actually going to be less money than if you sack the settlement. So first off, you need to invade via a naval invasion, sack the settlement, pray you have enough movement points in the same turn to actually set up a pirate cove. And when you do set up a pirate cove, you're going to run out of movement points. So you're going to be stuck in the middle of enemy territory with no movement points. I mean, you do have the ability of switching to encamp stance, so you do get an ambush defense chance, all those kind of benefits, to be sure. So you do have the ability of doing this without any kind of repercussions, absolutely, so that works. But still, yeah, it's a problem. And it's a gameplay style that doesn't work, because having to declare war on factions to set up pirate coves, which you need for hero capacity, means you're either reliant on allies to eliminate those factions, or other factions could raise the settlements, by the way, so all your effort was wasted. Or you're leaving enemies alive, and that's certainly not going to bite you in the ass on the long term. Like, the only way I've made this campaign work economically is because I declared war on tons of factions to get money from other factions. And I also allied Drakarth and Skrulk, so yeah. I mean, Luthor's campaign is actually a lot better than you might think, because it's like fighting lizardmen with gunpowder units is actually quite a lot easier than, fighting other factions. Like, people say Noctilus is better. It's like Noctilus has to deal with freaking Wolf One in his campaign. Silostra has to deal with Wolf One. And Aranessa, yeah, she has a lot of potential, because she does fix a lot of the issues, because Aranessa actually has infantry units. Like, no freaking joke. Like, she gets Sartusa Free Company, Sartusa Militia, she gets Ogre Man-Eaters in her campaigns if you own the Ogre DLC. And while these guys aren't great, they're certainly better than the entire freaking vampire, the zombie line over here, and worth recruiting. I mean, it's not great, again, but you just need a front line, an early, cheap front line that's going to be able to hold a line, not break, not rout, not disintegrate, and do a decent enough job. And by the way, when you look at Sartosa, guys, these guys have extra leadership and perfect vigor. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's free company militias, right? It's like, it's not nasty skulkers, it's like hobgoblins. But you just use these guys to fill up your armies, to provide the balance of power, and they're actually useful. One of the problems that you have in a Vampire Coast campaign is like, your sieges. Like, your entire army is so worthless in sieges, outside of a couple like monstrous units, which are expensive. So good luck owning a lot of them when you have one of the worst economies in the game. There's just so many things that don't work, and this is the reason, like economic buffs, research changes, confederation changes, objective changes. Oh, it's also fun, like, oh, you want regiments renowned? Go around the map wasting your time while you've got enemies to fight for long distances in order to get the blondes, the pieces of 8, in order to unlock those regiments renowned. That's an awful experience. Like, you do have naval benefits, but honestly, there's factions that do naval dominance better. I mean, just because you have movement range does not make you a naval dominant faction. Like, Dark Elves out there say do it far better because, yeah, they have a much better economy. Black Arcs are quite very strong in their own right, with a ton of their own benefits, and they have a lot more heroes and better units. So, yeah. Or Norska, if you want to talk about that. Sure, they don't have any of the naval benefits as the other two, but they get more income from ports. They have better armies. I mean, at least in terms of leadership, not necessarily armor. One benefit, though, to be talked about with the Vampire Coast is your armies are so horrible in terms of armor that you actually end up winning in a campaign from the following perspective. Because your armies are so horrible, the AI is always going to think, oh, I stand a better chance at attacking. So the AI is going to suicide armies. It might force you to fight a lot more balanced manually than you would ever care to. But if the AI is attacking you thinking they're going to have an easy time, that's certainly something you can use to your advantage to win. But still, like, I don't think the Vampire Coast really made the transition very well from Warhammer 2 to 3. They're one of those races. I think this applies to Lizardmen, applies to Beastmen, applies to X number of factions. And yeah, they do need some improvement. Cool concept, bad execution. Kosin signing out.